Hi everyone, my name is Tony and today I'm delighted to present to you about the research topic of smart cities through our Future, Our Voices virtual summit. Now you might be wondering what is smart cities and why am I talking about it today? Well, to give you a bit of background, I've previously been involved at the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which is a global initiative for the United Nations. And as part of that, I've been involved in the local Pathways Fellowship Program, where with other young urban leaders and other urban planning professionals, we've been understanding the Sustainable Development Goals, and which you might be aware were adopted in 2015. And as part of that, we've been really interested in understanding more about Sustainable Development Goal number 11. So that's sustainable cities and communities. And I've primarily been really interested and motivated on understanding how smart cities can be applied and what's the role and potential of smart cities thinking for areas such as Melbourne, which is where I'm based at here, and also for other parts of the world. So to give you a bit of breakdown, what today's session would primarily focus on, our outcomes today is to have an understanding of one, what is a smart city and how might it apply to your local area as well. Number two, looking at the lens of Melbourne, Australia, which has also been recognised as one of the world's most livable cities, to understand how other places around the world are developing their own smart city initiatives. And finally, to have an understanding on how we can use smart city frameworks and also tools for your local area to kickstart smart city projects. So I think first and foremost, it's very important to understand, or have a general agreement on what we mean by smart cities. So United Nations has actually set an international standards for what a smart city might be as an umbrella term. What we know of is that smart cities is very much about an effective integration of physical, digital, and human systems in the built environment to deliver a sustainable, prosperous, and inclusive future for all citizens. And I guess within that umbrella term, it's very important to keep in mind the SMART objectives, which you can see here in the diagram. So what S stands for is being specific. Smart cities really is about how do you address some urban problems or challenges in your local area. One might be an example, congestion in your local area and road network. This is where we look at what is the potential opportunity for your local area. So it might be because of high congestion in the roads, there's a potential to increase, to reduce commute time and to also better manage congestion flows in the local network, which comes down to understanding what are the solution options. And that may involve a smart city technology solution. For example, some cities I'm aware of, they would install smart sensors along roads that can detect when are the peak hours for road congestions and understand how to make it more efficient through real-time data information. So that's that. And then what the M stands for is measurable. So I think the philosophy is that you can't manage something that you can't measure. And same goes for here at smart cities. It's very important when one is developing projects that you have a key understanding on what are the key benefits and outcomes that you intend. And that's in the form of key performance indicators or metrics that you can actually understand whether it's been successful. So A stands for achievement and also being achievable. And what that really means is how do you make smart cities become from just a concept or just a blue sky thinking idea, such as transport, such as living, quality of life, into something that's more fundamentally grounded, such as bring it into reality. So what we mentioned about urban problem, opportunity, and solution. So R stands for being relevant. Smart cities is very much about the cities and also urban areas. But within every city and urban area, they have its own local community needs, priorities, and wants as well. So it's very important smart city projects are targeted to the local community priorities and needs above everything else. And finally, timely. So smart city projects have a certain start point and an end point in terms of project basis, but cities itself or themselves don't actually become just an ultimate endpoint. It's always constantly evolving, which is why as emerging technologies come and go, it's very important that cities are resilient and adapt to new challenges and also new opportunities in that regard. So now we have a general understanding of what smart cities as a concept might involve. There's a question also posed on why should we care, or what's the case for change at a glance? So what you can see here are approximately 4 global trends that we are starting to see for smart cities. The first one is population growth, really. Around 6 to 8%, or 2/3 of the world's population, are going to live in urban areas by 2050. And that's going to pose a lot of challenges as identified for United Nations in terms of resources and how do you manage the needs and wants of the communities that live with increased density as well. Another aspect is also mitigating impacts of climate change. What we know of is that the Paris Agreement goal was to keep the increase in global average temperature to well below 2%. And that is something that is fundamentally needs a worldwide effort, which means a lot of cities need to become much more greener and environmentally conscious, which smart city technologies can actually play a fundamental role in. Another part is what we're starting to see in cities and urban areas is rising technology capabilities. As we move to a new decade of possibilities, now we're able to see new technologies such as 3D printers, also artificial intelligence and blockchain security technology that are being used and integrated into everyday life. And as well as that, there's also increasing community aspirations. So there's a high expectations for our quality of life to increase over time. And finally, innovation and knowledge economy. At the end of the day, employment is what drives the economy and local economy or productivity. And what we know of is that smart cities market provides a new opportunity for worldwide, which it could be valuation of around $1.3 trillion. And that means we'll be able to tap onto new markets and potentially provide creative and high quality jobs. Now, this brings into a more of a grounded perspective when we look at the smart city wheel on how smart cities technology or what areas it might overlap with. What you can see here towards the left is that smart cities wheel is under 6 pillars. This involves smart living, environment, so it includes biodiversity and buildings, smart mobility, so that involves areas such as transport and commute network, smart people, so about how do you build more creative jobs, smart economy, how do you stimulate local economic growth, especially given the pandemic situation as well, and the transition towards automation of jobs, which means there's a new focus on the way we think about employment opportunities, and also smart governance. So you can see here, with your own local interests, you might be interested in education per se, or energy, water, or waste. Smart city technologies are able to offer a lot of categories in which they could be developed. And we'll show you a few examples now, where we look at a case study of Melbourne, Australia, which is considered one of the world's most livable cities over quite a long time frame. And I'd like to take you on a journey for Melbourne, the city of Melbourne, and what they've been underdoing. So how smart city initiatives are being developed and delivered here. Fundamentally, I think there are around 4 formats in which smart city projects are being delivered. One of them is about data and visualization. So how do we understand the way cities are designed and how buildings are able to be visualized in a way that is efficient and provides real-time and useful information to make better decision makings. Another aspect towards that is also programs. So how do we create innovation programs where they're working with universities or other startup companies that they're able to roll out initiatives so that it encourages people to upskill themselves to know more about technology and also understand the design thinking process of how what we'd mentioned about the problem and then opportunity and solution. And one example is in Melbourne, they're part of a university called a Connected Cities Lab, where they form ideas together with other local community citizens to come up with ideas and identify challenges in Melbourne. Another example is urban infrastructure. So this could be in the form of within streets or within buildings, how they might create soft and also hard infrastructure. For example, smart sensors we talked about for the congestion example. It could also be sensors within buildings where it creates green buildings because buildings are able to understand when there's leakages in electricity or gas and when it needs maintenance. in that way, it saves a lot more electricity in the long term, and that can translate to reduction in carbon emissions. Also, digital connectivity. So the world, as you know, is now really heavily involved in internet connectivity, and internet is also what we've recognized is not equally distributed across different communities, which is why it's very important to bridge that gap in data literacy and also our understanding on how internet could be used for those infrastructure we talked about, and as well as making sure we're able to be a connected and virtual cities. So what you can see here are some visuals for the Melbourne city and what they've done as some examples. One example I might draw your attention to is 24-hour pedestrian counting system that the City of Melbourne has developed, where it's actually been proven quite useful, especially for the recent pandemic situation, as they've been able to understand what were the peak travel and periods for when people were around cities and where it tends to be dense areas, because they're able to build sensors to understand when a person might walk past a sensor. Another area that they've also done is also smart bins. So across the city, they've installed these smart bins where they've got sensors installed. So when a bin is nearly filled to its capacity, that's able to bring that information to the council authorities. And that's when waste collection authorities are able to collect bins when it's full and at efficient timeframes, which helps to make sure roads are less congested with waste bins. So these are just some examples of what the Melbourne city is doing. Now I'd like to bring your attention to a quote here. So cities themselves are not smart, but it's the people behind them that are. I want to, I guess, emphasize that smart cities as a concept is very much people driven. So the way that smart city projects are interpreted is that the intent should always be about benefits and value added for communities and people who live and work in those areas. And that's sort of, I guess, the first and foremost criteria for it to become a smart city project or concept for us to keep in mind. And what's useful is actually understanding the smart city framework and guiding principles that might be evolved. So in our approach for smart city projects, it's very important to be authentic, innovative, and also collaborate. So be co-design with the community members at every step of the process, making sure you're engaged with different stakeholders involved who could have a key role in undertaking your project. It could also be making sure that you're transparent and accountable, as we mentioned about setting up benefits and key performance indicators to be able to measure what you want to manage or what you want to create. And here it follows the framework you can see, more of a business canvas model. So some of the key questions that one might consider is, what is the ultimate goal that the city seeks to achieve? Who will directly benefit from it? Also questions around budget and revenue streams and environmental benefits that you're going to be able to deliver. In that way, it's very clear what project you might want to undertake. As we know, smart cities concept is very broad. It could involve one of the 4 formats or other formats potentially, and it could involve any other sort of categories or pillars that we initially talked about. So I just want to give some key takeaways or a recap of today's session. Just to recap, what makes a smart city is what we mentioned about the SMART objectives. So being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. And one example of an aspiring smart city we mentioned about is the City of Melbourne in Australia, where they're actually rolling out some smart city initiatives in various formats, as what we mentioned, data and visualization, or programs, or digital connectivity, or urban infrastructure. Now, what's the key or steps for success for a smart city is very much about designing, so it's the people and the community behind cities that are the key drivers of successful initiatives. And where do we start with smart city projects? It's about applying the smart city wheel, the framework that we just mentioned about, and also understanding what other cities or what other sites and how they sort of do it, given that smart city projects are sort of a phenomenon where a lot of cities have actually been taking a leading role in. And a lot of cities have also announced and released their own smart city strategies, which provide a detailed understanding on what exactly the steps they want to undertake. So that could be a really great key resource. Once again, so I'm Tony. I'm currently based here in Melbourne, Australia, and really keen to keep in touch. So feel free to contact me, as I am currently an urban planner. Feel free to give me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'm really happy to take on any other further questions, or if you'd like me to take part of any other initiative. Thanks a lot, and I hope you enjoy the rest of our Future Our Voices Summit, and really great to hear from you.